The coastal city of Lagos buzzed with energy as Grace Okonkwo stepped off the bus at the Victoria Island terminal. At 24 years old, she carried everything she owned in a single worn duffel bag. The humid air clung to her skin as she navigated through the crowded streets, clutching a piece of paper with an address written in careful handwriting. Grace had traveled from her small village in Enugu State, leaving behind her aging mother and two younger cousins who depended on her. After her uncle passed away last year, she became the family's primary hope for survival. The remittances she would send home would pay for school fees, medical bills, and food. This job opportunity at the prestigious Emerald Heights Hotel was her family's lifeline. The hotel loomed before her like a glass and steel monument to wealth. 20 stories tall, it overlooked the Atlantic Ocean with a grandeur that made Grace feel impossibly small. She had seen pictures of luxury hotels and magazines, but nothing prepared her for the reality of walking through the polished marble lobby. "Can I help you?" A stern-looking woman in a crisp navy uniform approached her. "Good afternoon, Ma. My name is Grace Okonkwo. I have an appointment with Mr. Kenneth Adeyemi about the housekeeping position." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Ah, yes, you're the new girl. I'm Mrs. Folake, the head of housekeeping. Follow me." As they walked through the service corridors, Mrs. Folake explained the hotel's operations. "Mr. Adeyemi owns 3 hotels in Lagos. This is his flagship property. He's very particular about cleanliness and service. If you work hard and keep your head down, you'll do fine here." There was something in Mrs. Folake's tone that made Grace uneasy, a warning hidden beneath the practical advice. They arrived at a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man in his early 40s, impeccably dressed in a white igbata with gold threading. Kenneth Adeyemi was handsome in a polished way, with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. "Mr. Adeyemi, this is Grace Okonkwo, the candidate for the housekeeping position." He looked up from his computer, and his eyes swept over Grace with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Welcome, Grace. Please sit down." Mrs. Folake excused herself, leaving Grace alone with him. "Tell me about yourself," Kenneth said, leaning back in his leather chair. Grace kept her eyes respectfully lowered. "I'm from Enugu, sir. I completed secondary school and have worked in cleaning services for 2 years. I'm hardworking and reliable. My family depends on me, so this job means everything." "Family is important," Kenneth agreed, but there was something calculating in his smile. "I admire loyalty. The position pays 60,000 naira per month, with accommodation provided in the staff quarters. You'll work 6 days a week, with Sundays off. Does this sound acceptable?" It was more money than Grace had ever earned. "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir." "Good. You'll start tomorrow morning at 6. Mrs. Folake will show you to your room and explain your duties." He stood and walked around the desk, standing closer than necessary. "I like to take a personal interest in my employees, Grace. I believe in rewarding hard work. I think you and I will get along very well." The way he said it made Grace's stomach turn, but she needed this job desperately. Thank you for watching Chapter 1. If you're enjoying this story of courage and justice, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for the next chapter. Comment below. What do you think will happen to Grace? Where are you watching from? New York, London, Johannesburg, or Lagos? We want to hear from you. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Grace's room in the staff quarters was small but clean, a narrow bed, a wooden locker, and a single window that looked out onto the hotel's loading dock. It was luxury compared to what she'd left behind in the village. She unpacked her few belongings and placed a framed photograph of her mother and cousins on the small table beside her bed. That evening, Mrs. Folake returned to brief her on the next day's duties. The older woman sat on the edge of Grace's bed, her official demeanor softening once they were alone. "Grace, I need to tell you something important," Mrs. Folake began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Adeyemi is not the man he appears to be in public." Grace's heart began to race. "What do you mean, Ma?" "He's very charitable, very respected in Lagos society. He donates to orphanages, sponsors university students, appears on television talking about empowering Nigerian youth. Mrs. Folake paused, choosing her words carefully. But here, in this hotel, away from the cameras, he's different. Different how? Mrs. Folake looked toward the door, ensuring they were truly alone. There have been other girls like you. Young, from villages, desperate for work. Girls with no family in Lagos, no connections, no protection. Her voice cracked slightly. He starts friendly, giving compliments, small gifts. Then the gifts come with expectations. Then the expectations become demands. Grace felt cold despite the warm evening air. What happened to these other girls? Some left quietly, taking whatever money they could and disappearing. Others try to speak up, but Mr. Adeyemi has powerful friends. Lawyers, police commissioners, journalists. The girls were always painted as liars, gold diggers trying to extort a successful businessman. Mrs. Folake reached out and squeezed Grace's hand. One girl tried to go to the authorities. She was arrested for theft, charged with stealing hotel property. No one ever saw her again after that. Why are you telling me this? Because you remind me of my own daughter, Mrs. Folake said, tears forming in her eyes. She's studying nursing in Ibadan. I worked here for 12 years, sending her money, keeping my head down, surviving. But I see these young girls come and go, and I feel guilty for my silence. What should I do? Grace asked, fear gripping her chest. Be professional. Stay in public areas as much as possible. If he calls you to his office, bring something with you, cleaning supplies, documents, anything that gives you an excuse to leave quickly. And if he, Mrs. Folake couldn't finish the sentence. If things become difficult, don't fight openly. That's when he becomes dangerous. Just survive, save money, and leave as soon as you can. After Mrs. Folake left, Grace lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her mother's weak heart, the medication that cost money they didn't have. She thought about her cousins, bright children who deserved education. She thought about the village expecting her to succeed, to become their connection to opportunity in the big city. She couldn't afford to fail. She couldn't afford to leave. Grace pulled out her phone, an old Nokia that barely worked, and stared at it. It could make calls and send text messages, but nothing more. Tomorrow, she decided, she would find an internet cafe and create an email account. If Mrs. Folake's warnings proved true, Grace would need every tool available to protect herself. At 5:30 the next morning, Grace woke before her alarm. She dressed in the simple uniform provided, a gray dress with white collar and cuffs, and tied her hair back tightly. In the staff dining room, she ate a quick breakfast of akamu and bread while other workers ate in tired silence. Mrs. Folake found her at 6 o'clock sharp. Ready for your first day? Yes, Ma. Good. You'll start on the 10th floor. Executive suites. These are our most important guests, politicians, business owners, for investors. Everything must be perfect. Mrs. Folake handed her a master key card and a supply card. Check each room on your list. Change linens, clean bathrooms, vacuum carpets, dust all surfaces. You have 8 rooms to complete before noon. The work was exhausting but straightforward. Grace moved methodically from room to room, taking pride in her thoroughness. She was finishing her 7th room when her phone buzzed with a text message. Grace, this is Mr. Adeyemi. Please come to my office on the 20th floor when you finish your morning rounds. I need to discuss your performance. Her hands trembled as she read the message. It was only her first day. What performance could he possibly need to discuss? Mrs. Folake's warning echoed in her mind. If he calls you to his office, bring something with you. Grace finished her last room quickly, then made her way to the 20th floor, her cleaning cart rattling ahead of her. She knocked on the heavy wooden door, her heart pounding. Come in, Kenneth's voice called from inside. Grace pushed open the door, deliberately leaving the cleaning cart wedged in the doorway to keep it from closing completely. Kenneth looked up from his desk and frowned slightly at the cart. You can leave that outside, Grace. I thought I might clean your office while we talk, sir. To save time. His eyes narrowed, but he smiled. Such dedication on your first day. Come, sit down. We need to have a conversation. Grace perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, every muscle in her body tense. You're very pretty, Grace, Kenneth said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "Much prettier than your photograph suggested. I think you're going to be very valuable to this hotel." The way he emphasized valuable made Grace's skin crawl. Her nightmare was beginning. Grace sat rigidly in the chair, maintaining a respectful distance from Kenneth's desk. He stood and walked around to perch on the edge of it, positioning himself uncomfortably close to her. "You know, Grace, success in this industry isn't just about cleaning rooms," he said smoothly. "It's about understanding relationships, loyalty, and mutual benefit. I help people who help me. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "I understand that I want to work hard and do my job well, sir," Grace replied carefully. Kenneth chuckled, a sound that held no warmth. Of course. But there are different levels of employment here. Some people just clean rooms. Others become part of my inner circle, receive better pay, better accommodations, special bonuses." He reached out and touched her shoulder. "I can see you're special, Grace. I knew at the moment you walked in yesterday." Grace stood abruptly, stepping away from his touch. "Sir, I should return to my duties. Mrs. Folake will be expecting my report." His expression darkened for a brief moment before the smile returned. "Yes, you're right. Very professional. I admire that." He walked back behind his desk and pulled out a crisp bundle of Naira notes. "Here, take this. 5,000 Naira. A welcome bonus for your first day." "Sir, that's very generous, but my salary—" "Take it, Grace. I insist. Buy yourself something nice. You deserve it." He pressed the money into her hand, his fingers lingering on hers. "We'll talk again very soon. I like to check on my new employees regularly." Very regularly. Grace took the money, knowing that refusing would make things worse. "Thank you, sir." As she left his office, pulling her cleaning cart behind her, Grace's mind raced. 5,000 Naira for doing nothing. It was clearly a test, a down payment on future expectations. Mrs. Folake had been right about everything. That evening, Grace walked to an internet cafe 3 blocks from the hotel. She paid 50 Naira for 30 minutes of computer time and created a new email account. She also discovered that her old Nokia phone, while primitive, had one useful feature she'd never explored: a voice recorder that could capture up to 30 minutes of audio. Back in her room, Grace tested the recording function. The quality was poor, but voices were audible. She practiced keeping the phone in her uniform pocket with the recorder running. It might not be perfect, but it was something. Over the next 3 weeks, Grace established a careful routine. She worked efficiently, kept her interactions with Kenneth brief and professional, and saved every Naira she could. She sent money home to her mother, but kept detailed records of every transaction, every expense, every payment. Kenneth's attention, however, intensified. He found increasing reasons to summon her to his office, always when fewer staff members were around. The conversations grew more inappropriate, the compliments more personal, the touches more frequent. "Grace, you have such beautiful skin. Do you use special creams?" "Grace, that uniform fits you perfectly. You should wear more fitted clothing." "Grace, I'm having a private dinner in the penthouse suite on Saturday. I like you to serve. Just the 2 of us." Each time, Grace deflected politely but firmly, always keeping physical distance, always ensuring someone else knew where she was. And increasingly, she kept her phone recording in her pocket. One recording captured Kenneth saying, "You know, Grace, girls who cooperate with me end up very comfortable. Those who don't, well, Lagos is a difficult city for unemployed women with no references." Another recording caught him complaining about a former employee. "She thought she could refuse me and still keep her job. I made sure she never worked in hospitality again. One phone call to my friends, and she became unemployable. Power is everything in this city, Grace. Never forget that." Grace saved each recording to her email account, carefully labeling them with dates and brief descriptions. She also began documenting everything in a notebook she kept hidden under her mattress. Dates, times, what was said, what happened, who else was present. Mrs. Folake noticed the toll it was taking on Grace. "You look tired, my dear. Are you sleeping well?" "I'm fine, Ma. Just working hard." "Has he?" Mrs. Folake couldn't finish the question. "Not yet," Grace said quietly. "But I know it's coming. I can feel it." "Oh, Grace, Mrs. Folake's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. I wish I could protect you. You warned me. That's all you could do. Grace squeezed the older woman's hand. But I'm not like the other girls. I'm preparing for what's coming. And when it happens, I won't be silent. Mrs. Folake looked frightened. Grace, be careful. He's more dangerous than you think. I know, but I'm more prepared than he thinks. The confrontation Grace dreaded came on a Thursday evening. Most of the staff had left for the day. Grace was finishing her rounds on the 15th floor when her phone buzzed. Grace, come to the penthouse suite immediately. I need you to inspect something. The penthouse was Kenneth's private residence within the hotel. Grace had never been summoned there before. She knew what this meant. Her hand shook as she pressed record on her phone and placed it carefully in her uniform pocket. Then she took the service elevator to the top floor, each ascending second feeling like a countdown to something terrible. When she knocked on the penthouse door, Kenneth answered immediately, wearing casual clothes and holding a glass of cognac. Grace, come in. I've been waiting for you. The suite was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Lego skyline, expensive furniture, soft lighting. But all Grace could think about was the door closing behind her with a heavy, final click. Kenneth closed the distance between them before Grace could back away. You've been working here for almost a month now, Grace. You're one of my best employees. Mrs. Folake has given glowing reports. Thank you, sir. I should return to my duties. Your duties can wait. His voice hardened slightly. We need to discuss your future here. Sit down. It wasn't a request. Grace perched on the edge of an expensive leather sofa, her phone recording everything in her pocket. Kenneth sat beside her, too close. I've been very patient with you, Grace. Very generous. The bonus, the flexible schedule when you needed to send money home, the extra shifts I've given you. I think it's time you showed some appreciation. Sir, I am appreciative. I work hard every day. That's not what I mean. He placed his hand on her knee. You're a smart girl. You know what I'm talking about. Grace stood quickly, moving toward the door. Sir, this isn't appropriate. I'm just an employee. This is not part of my job. Kenneth's expression turned cold. He stood, blocking her path to the door. Your job is whatever I say it is. I own this hotel, Grace. I own everything in it, including you. You don't own me, Grace said, her voice trembling but firm. I'm a person, not property. You're a poor village girl with no education and no options, Kenneth said cruelly. Without this job, what are you? Nothing. How will you send money to your sick mother? How will your cousins stay in school? What will your entire village think when you return home a failure? Tears began streaming down Grace's face. Please, sir. Please don't do this. I need this job, but not like this. Please. Then stop being difficult. He grabbed her arm roughly. This is how things work in the real world, Grace. Powerful men take what they want. Women who are smart cooperate and benefit. Women who resist end up with nothing. Sir, I need to tell you something, Grace said desperately, trying one last strategy. I'm sick. I have a medical condition. You get sick too. Please, you need to understand. Kenneth laughed harshly. You think I'm stupid enough to fall for that excuse? Every girl who doesn't want to sleep with a man suddenly claims to have some disease. He pulled her closer. I'm healthy. I'm careful about these things. And I'm not interested in your lies. It's not a lie, Grace cried. Please listen to me. Enough talking. Kenneth's grip tightened. You have two choices, Grace. Cooperate right now, or pack your things and leave tonight. Not just leave the hotel, leave Lagos. I'll make sure you never work anywhere in this city again. I'll call the police and report that you stole from hotel guests. Do you think anyone will believe a poor maid over me? Grace felt trapped, cornered like an animal. Every escape route was blocked. Every option led to disaster. If she refused, her family would suffer. If she submitted, her soul would die. I can't, she whispered. Please, God, I can't. You can, and you will. Kenneth began pulling her toward the bedroom. Grace tried to resist, tried to pull away, but he was stronger. She thought about screaming, but who would hear? Who would help? The penthouse was soundproofed, isolated at the top of the building. The few staff members remaining worked floors below. What happened next was exactly what Mrs. Folake had warned about, exactly what had happened to countless girls before her. Grace's pleas were ignored. Her tears were dismissed. Her humanity was erased. When it was finally over, Kenneth got dressed as if nothing significant had occurred. He pulled out his wallet and counted out 10,000 naira, tossing the bills on the bed beside where Grace lay crying. "Buy yourself something nice," he said casually, "and clean yourself up before you leave. I don't want the night security seeing you like this and getting the wrong idea." He checked his watch. "Same time next week. I'll text you the details. Oh, and Grace, if you tell anyone about this, remember what I said about the police and theft charges. I have security footage of you entering guest rooms. It would be very easy to claim you're stealing." He left the penthouse, leaving Grace alone in the wreckage of her dignity. For a long time, Grace couldn't move. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow and destroyed. Then, slowly, she remembered the phone still recording in her uniform pocket. She had evidence. She had his words, his threats, his admission of power and abuse. The recording wasn't perfect. There were muffled sounds, moments of silence, but Kenneth's voice was clear in the crucial moments. Grace dressed mechanically, her body moving on autopilot. She took the money, not because she wanted it, but because it was evidence too. She carefully noted the date, time, and amount in her mental record. As she rode the service elevator down to the ground floor, Grace made a decision. She wouldn't run. She wouldn't disappear like the others. She would survive, document everything, and wait for the right moment. Kenneth Adeyemi had made a terrible mistake. He thought he had broken her. Instead, he had created something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Grace spent that night in her small room, curled on her bed, unable to sleep. Her body ached, her heart ached, but her mind was oddly clear. She had crossed into territory she'd never imagined, and there was no going back to the innocent girl who'd arrived from Enugu 4 weeks ago. At dawn, she forced herself to stand, to wash, to dress. She transferred the audio recording from her phone to her email account, labeling it carefully. April 18th, penthouse, threats, and assault. Then she wrote everything she could remember in her notebook, every detail, every word, every moment. Mrs. Folake found her in the staff dining room, barely touching her breakfast. The older woman sat down quietly beside her. "Grace, I'm fine, Ma." "You're not fine. I can see it in your eyes." Mrs. Folake's voice broke. "He called you to the penthouse, didn't he?" Grace nodded silently, unable to speak. "Oh, my child." Mrs. Folake pulled her into a hug, and Grace finally let herself cry, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "I tried to warn him," Grace whispered. "I tried to tell him about my condition. He didn't believe me. He thought I was lying." Mrs. Folake pulled back, confused. "Your condition? What condition?" Grace took a shaky breath. "I'm HIV positive. I was diagnosed 3 years ago, before I even left Enugu. My ex-boyfriend infected me and disappeared. I take medication every day to stay healthy." Mrs. Folake's eyes widened with horror and understanding. "And Mr. Adeyemi, he didn't use protection? He refused. He said he was healthy, that God protects him, that I was lying about being sick." Grace's voice was hollow. "I warned him, Ma. I begged him to stop, to at least protect himself. But he wouldn't listen." "Dear God," Mrs. Folake breathed. "Does he know now? Did you tell him after?" "No, and I won't tell him." Grace's eyes hardened. "He made his choice. He ignored my warnings. He forced me despite knowing the risk. Whatever happens to him now, he brought it on himself." Mrs. Folake looked conflicted, compassionate toward Grace but disturbed by the implications. "Grace, this is serious. Very serious. I know, but so is what he did to me. So is what he's done to all the other girls." Grace wiped her tears. "I'm documenting everything, Ma. Every time he calls me, every text message, every encounter. I'm recording his words, his threats, his abuse. I'm building evidence." "Evidence for what? Who will you report him to?" "I don't know yet. But when the time comes, I want proof of everything. Proof that he's not the charitable businessman everyone thinks he is. Proof that he's a predator who abuses his power." Mrs. Folake was quiet for a moment. "There are others who would testify, you know. Former employees. If you could find them, if you could convince them to speak up. Do you have their contacts? Some of them, yes. But Grace, they're all terrified. He ruined their lives. They scattered across Lagos, taking whatever work they could find. Some left the city entirely. Can you help me reach them? Even if they won't testify now, they should know someone is finally fighting back. They should know they weren't alone. Over the next several weeks, a horrifying routine established itself. Kenneth summoned Grace regularly, sometimes to the penthouse, sometimes to hotel rooms he booked under false names. Each time, Grace went with her phone recording, documenting his words, his threats, his casual cruelty. You're learning, Grace. You're becoming much more cooperative. See how easy life is when you don't fight. I have a business dinner next Tuesday. I want you there, wearing something elegant. I'll buy you a dress. You'll sit quietly, look beautiful, and come back to my room afterward. That girl before you, the one who tried to report me, she's cleaning toilets at a bus station now. That's what happens to girls who cross me. Each recording was saved, backed up, cataloged. Each payment was documented. Grace kept the money in separate envelopes, marked with dates and amounts. She sent most of it home to her mother, keeping just enough for transportation and her HIV medication. But Grace noticed something troubling. Her medication supplies were running low, and with the stress and trauma, she'd missed several doses. Her doctor in Enugu had been clear. Missing doses could reduce the medication's effectiveness and allow the virus to multiply. She needed to see a doctor in Lagos, but that required money and time, both of which were scarce. Meanwhile, Mrs. Foley quietly provided Grace with contact information for 3 former employees. Grace called each one, introducing herself carefully, explaining her situation. The first woman, Chioma, hung up immediately upon hearing Kenneth's name. The second, Blessing, listened but refused to get involved. He destroyed my life once already. I won't give him another chance. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. The third, Amaka, was different. She listened to Grace's story, silent for a long moment before speaking. I was 18 when I worked there, Amaka said quietly. Fresh from secondary school, desperate to help my family. He did the same thing to me. The compliments, the gifts, then the threats, then the assault. When I tried to refuse, he had me arrested for theft. I spent 3 days in jail before my family could bail me out. The charges were eventually dropped, but the humiliation, the shame, it destroyed me. I'm so sorry, Grace said. Are you really documenting everything? Do you really have proof? Yes. Hours of recordings, text messages, everything. Then I'll help you. I'll testify. I'll tell my story. Amaka's voice grew stronger. Not for revenge, but so no other girl has to go through what we did. Find a lawyer, build your case, and when you're ready, contact me. Grace felt hope for the first time in weeks. She wasn't alone anymore, but she also knew the most dangerous phase was ahead. Kenneth was already sick. She'd noticed him looking increasingly tired, losing weight, coughing frequently. He attributed it to stress and overwork, refusing to see doctors despite his symptoms worsening. Grace knew what was happening. The virus worked quickly in people who didn't know they were infected, especially when they ignored early symptoms. Kenneth was becoming sicker, and eventually, he would discover the truth. When that moment came, everything would explode. 3 months after Grace's nightmare began, Kenneth Adeyemi's health deteriorated noticeably. He lost 15 pounds despite eating normally. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. He developed a persistent cough that echoed through the hotel corridors. Staff members whispered among themselves, speculation spreading like wildfire. Mr. Adeyemi looks very sick. Maybe it's pneumonia. My cousin had symptoms like that. It was tuberculosis. Someone said he collapsed in his office yesterday. Kenneth dismissed all concerns with angry outbursts. I'm fine. It's just stress from managing multiple properties. Mind your own business. But Grace watched his decline with complicated emotions. Part of her felt a grim satisfaction. This was justice in its purest form. He had ignored her warnings, dismissed her humanity, and now faced consequences of his own making. Yet another part of her felt a deep sadness, not for him, but for the entire situation. None of this needed to happen. If he had simply treated her with dignity, respected her boundaries, listened to her warnings, both of them would be healthy and whole. One morning, Mrs. Folake pulled Grace aside in the linen storage room. Mr. Adeyemi has finally agreed to see a doctor. His wife is forcing him. She's been threatening to leave if he doesn't get examined. Grace's heart skipped. She hadn't known Kenneth was married. His wife. Yes, Mrs. Judith Adeyemi. She's a lawyer, very powerful in her own right. She travels frequently for work, which is why you've never seen her around the hotel. Mrs. Folake shook her head. Poor woman has no idea what her husband has been doing. Grace felt a new layer of guilt settle on her shoulders. She was about to destroy not just Kenneth's life, but his wife's as well. An innocent woman who'd done nothing wrong. When is his appointment? This afternoon at the private clinic on Ozumba Mbadu Avenue. He's getting a full examination and blood work. Grace knew what those results would reveal. The timeline was accelerating faster than she'd anticipated. That evening, Grace was mopping the hallway near Kenneth's penthouse when she heard shouting from inside. She paused, listening. "Explain this to me, Kenneth," a woman's voice demanded. "Explain how this is possible." "Judith, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down." The doctor called with preliminary results. "You're HIV positive, Kenneth. HIV positive. How is this possible? We've been married for 8 years. There must be a mistake. The test is wrong. They ran it twice. How did you get infected? Who had you been with?" Grace's hands trembled on the mop handle. This was it, the moment everything began to unravel. "I don't know how this happened," Kenneth said, his voice shaking. "I swear to you, I've been faithful." "Liar." Something shattered against a wall. "I'm not stupid, Kenneth. I know about your reputation. I've heard the rumors about you and young female staff, but I ignored them because I wanted to believe you were better than that." There was a long silence. Then Judith spoke again, her voice cold. "I'm getting tested tomorrow. And if I'm positive too, if you've infected me with your infidelity and recklessness, I will destroy you. I will take everything, the hotels, the properties, the investments, everything. And I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are." The door flew open and a tall, elegant woman stormed out, nearly colliding with Grace. Judith Adeyemi paused, looking at Grace with red-rimmed eyes full of pain and rage. "Who are you?" "Grace Okonkwo, ma. I'm a housekeeper." Judith stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "How long have you worked here?" "For months, ma. For months." Judith repeated the words slowly, as if they meant something significant. Then she walked away quickly, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Kenneth appeared in the doorway, looking haggard and defeated. He saw Grace, and his expression transformed into fury. "You," he hissed. "This is your fault. You infected me, you diseased witch." Grace took a step back, but Kenneth advanced on her, grabbing her arm roughly. "I warned you," Grace said quietly, her voice steady despite her fear. "The first night in the penthouse. I told you I was HIV positive. I beg you to stop, to use protection. You call me a liar. You said God protected you. You said I was making excuses. You're lying. You never told me. I have proof." The words came out before Grace could stop them. "I have recordings of everything. Your threats, your abuse, your dismissal of my warnings. Everything." Kenneth's grip loosened in shock. "Recordings?" "Yes. Every conversation, every encounter. Your voice is crystal clear on all of them." His face went pale, then purple with rage. "You recorded me without permission? That's illegal. I'll have you arrested." "For what? Documenting evidence of sexual assault? Documenting workplace abuse? Documenting my attempts to warn you about a serious health risk that you ignored." Grace pulled her arm free. "You can try to have me arrested, sir, but I think your lawyers will be too busy defending you from much more serious charges." Kenneth stared at her, finally seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time, not as a powerless victim, but as an adversary who'd been planning and preparing while he assumed she was broken. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm the girl whose life you tried to destroy," Grace said calmly. "And I'm the one who's going to make sure you never hurt anyone else again." She picked up her mop and bucket and walked away, leaving Kenneth standing alone in the hallway, his empire crumbling around him. The war was no longer coming. It had arrived. Grace knew she needed legal help immediately. Kenneth would come after her with everything he had, his money, his connections, his lawyers. She couldn't fight this battle alone. The next morning, Grace used her day off to visit the legal aid office Mrs. Folake had told her about. The address led her to a modest building in Yaba, far from the gleaming towers of Victoria Island. The reception area was crowded with people waiting for assistance, women seeking divorces, families fighting evictions, workers claiming unpaid wages. After 2 hours of waiting, Grace was called into a small office where a young woman sat behind a desk piled high with case files. She looked exhausted but kind. "Good afternoon. I'm Kayamika Obi, one of the legal aid attorneys here. How can I help you?" Grace took a deep breath and told her story, all of it. The job at the hotel, Kenneth's harassment, the escalating abuse, the threats, the assaults, her HIV status, her warnings that were ignored, and most importantly, the evidence she'd been collecting. Kayamika listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Grace finished, the lawyer sat back in her chair. "Grace, what you've described is criminal on multiple levels: sexual harassment, workplace abuse, assault, coercion under threat. But I need to be honest with you about what we're facing." She ticked points off on her fingers. Kenneth Adeyemi is extremely wealthy and well-connected. He's donated to political campaigns, sponsors media events, and has friends in the police force and judiciary. Cases against men like him rarely succeed because they have the resources to bury accusations and intimidate witnesses. "But I have proof," Grace said desperately. "Hours of recordings, which is excellent, better than most cases I see. But we need to be strategic about how we use this evidence." Kayamika pulled out a legal pad. "First, I need to review all your recordings, text messages, and documentation. Second, we need to find other victims willing to testify. One person's word can be dismissed, but a pattern of behavior is much harder to ignore. I found one woman willing to testify. Her name is Amaka. He had her arrested on false theft charges when she tried to refuse him." Kayamika's eyes widened. "He's done this before?" "Multiple times. According to the head housekeeper, there have been many girls over the years. Most disappeared quietly, too afraid to speak up. If we can find even 2 or 3 willing to testify, combined with your recordings, we might have a case." Kayamika leaned forward. "But Grace, I need you to understand something. This would get ugly. Kenneth will claim you seduced him, that you're lying for money, that the recordings are fake or taken out of context. His lawyers will attack your character, your background, your HIV status. They'll try to paint you as a gold digger who deliberately infected him. Let them try," Grace said firmly. "I have the truth, and I have proof. That has to count for something." "It does. But truth and justice aren't always the same thing in our legal system." Kayamika sighed. "However, there's one factor working in our favor: his wife. If Judith Adeyemi turns against him, if she provides testimony or financial support for the case, that changes everything. A wealthy, credible witness from his own social class can't be easily dismissed. How do we approach her? Carefully. She's probably in shock right now, angry and humiliated. She might be in denial, wanting to protect her marriage and reputation. Or she might be ready to burn everything down." Kayamika tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Give me a few days to review your evidence and do some research on Kenneth's background. I want to see if there are other complaints filed against him, other legal issues we can leverage." Grace left the office feeling both hopeful and terrified. She was actually doing this, taking on one of Lagos's most powerful businessmen. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, possibly both. That evening, as Grace was cleaning one of the executive suites, her phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello. Is this Grace Okonkwo?" A woman's voice, educated and authoritative. "Yes, Ma. Who is this?" "Judith Adeyemi, Kenneth's wife. We need to talk." Grace's heart began pounding. "Yes, Ma. When?" "Tonight. 9 o'clock. There's a coffee shop called the Brew House in Lekki. Come alone and bring your evidence." "How did you know about?" "I'm a lawyer, Grace. A very good one. I've spent the last 2 days investigating my husband's activities. Multiple sources mentioned a young housekeeper who he'd been spending time with. I did the math. 4 months since you started, for months since his behavior changed, for months before he tested positive. Judith's voice was cold, controlled. I want to hear your side of the story, and I want to hear those recordings. Mrs. Adeyemi, I need you to know, I tried to warn him. I never wanted. Save it for tonight. 9 o'clock. Don't be late. The line went dead. Grace sat on the edge of the hotel bed, her hands shaking. This meeting could change everything. Judith Adeyemi could become a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. Everything depended on the next few hours. At 8:30, Grace left the hotel and took a taxi to Lekki. The brew house was a quiet, upscale cafe with private booths, the kind of place where Lagos's elite conducted discreet conversations. Judith was already there, seated in a corner booth, wearing a business suit despite the late hour. She looked composed, but her eyes were red from crying. Sit down, Grace. Grace slid into the booth, placing her phone on the table between them. Tell me everything, Judith said, and then play me those recordings. I want to hear my husband's voice. I want to know exactly what kind of man I've been married to. Grace took a deep breath and began to speak. Grace spoke for over an hour, detailing every encounter with Kenneth from the first inappropriate comment to the assaults in the penthouse. Judith listened in stony silence, her jaw tightening with each revelation. When Grace finished, Judith spoke quietly. Play the recordings. Grace navigated to her email and played the first audio file. Kenneth's voice clear and unmistakable. Your job is whatever I say it is. I own this hotel, Grace. I own everything in it, including you. Judith closed her eyes, pain flashing across her face. The second recording was worse. That girl before you, the one who tried to report me, she's cleaning toilets at a bus station now. That's what happens to girls who cross me. By the third recording, the one from the penthouse where Grace could be heard crying and begging, Judith had tears streaming down her face. Stop, she whispered. I've heard enough. They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Judith spoke, her voice hollow. I've been tested. The results come back tomorrow, but the doctor said preliminary indicators suggest I'm negative. Kenneth and we haven't been intimate in over a year. Our marriage has been dead for a long time, but I stayed because of our children, our reputation, our business interests. She looked up at Grace. I feel like a fool. I heard rumors about his behavior with female staff, but I convinced myself they were exaggerations, jealous gossip from competitors. Mrs. Adeyemi, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. You're not responsible for my husband's actions. Judith's expression hardened. I want to help you destroy him. Grace felt a surge of relief and fear. Ow! I'm a corporate lawyer with 20 years of experience. I have resources, connections, and most importantly, I know exactly where Kenneth is vulnerable. Judith pulled out a leather folder. I've already begun documenting his assets. 3 hotels, 2 commercial properties, investment accounts, offshore holdings. In our prenuptial agreement, infidelity is grounds for immediate asset forfeiture. If I can prove he cheated, I get everything. You want me to testify in your divorce? More than that, I want you to press criminal charges. Sexual assault, workplace harassment, coercion. I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Judith leaned forward. But here's the strategic part. I'm not going to divorce him immediately. I'm going to stay married, play the supportive wife, while you build your criminal case. When the time is right, when the evidence is public and undeniable, then I'll file for divorce. He won't be able to hide assets or claim victim status because the criminal case will have already exposed him. That's brilliant, Grace said. But why would you help me? You don't know me. Because you're not the first girl he's abused, and you won't be the last unless someone stops him. Judith's voice shook with emotion. Because I have 2 daughters, Grace. Teenagers who look up to their father, who think he's a hero. They need to know the truth about who he really is before they marry men just like him. She paused. And because helping you is the only way I can live with myself after years of willful blindness. Grace felt tears welling up. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone powerful believed her, supported her, stood with her. What do we do first? Grace asked. First, I'm hiring you the best criminal defense attorney in Lagos. Not legal aid, someone with the experience and reputation to go head-to-head with Kenneth's team. I'll pay all legal fees. Judith pulled out a business card. Second, you need to document your HIV status with a medical professional. Get tested again, get your medical records from Enugu, establish a clear timeline of when you were diagnosed versus when Kenneth was diagnosed. This proves you didn't deliberately infect him. You had the virus long before you met him, and you warned him about it. Grace nodded, taking notes on her phone. Third, we need to find every other victim. I'll use my connections to track down former employees. Some of them might have signed non-disclosure agreements, but NDAs don't protect criminal behavior. We can get those agreements invalidated. Mrs. Folake has contact information for at least 3 women. One has already agreed to testify. Excellent. I'll have my investigator reach out to them, offer protection, financial support if needed. Judith checked her watch. Fourth, and this is crucial, you cannot quit your job or do anything that looks like you're running away. Kenneth will claim you're fleeing because you're guilty. You need to keep working, keep your head down, act normal while we build the case behind the scenes. But he knows about the recordings now. He's going to be careful. Let him be careful. We already have enough evidence to prosecute. Anything else is just additional nails in his coffin. Judith's eyes were steel. Can you continue working there? Can you face him every day knowing what we're planning? Grace thought about her mother's medical bills, her cousin's school fees, all the girls who'd suffered before her. Yes, I can do it. Good. Because this is going to get worse before it gets better. Kenneth is going to become paranoid, possibly violent. He might try to fire you, intimidate you, or worse. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. Judith programmed her number into Grace's phone. Day or night, I'll answer. They left the cafe separately to avoid being seen together. Grace took a taxi back to the hotel, her mind racing with everything that had just happened. She had a powerful ally now, resources, a plan. For the first time in months, she felt like she had a fighting chance. But Judith was right. Things were about to get much worse. The next morning, Grace arrived for her shift to find the hotel in chaos. Police cars were parked outside, officers moving through the building. Grace's stomach dropped. Had Kenneth already made his move? Mrs. Folake rushed up to her, looking panicked. Grace, thank God. The police are looking for you. For me? What? Mr. Adeyemi filed a report last night. He's claiming you stole money from his office, expensive jewelry from the penthouse, and that you've been blackmailing him with false accusations. Grace felt the world spinning. She should have expected this, but the speed of his counterattack still shocked her. It's all lies. I know that, but the police don't. They have a warrant for your arrest. Before Grace could respond, 2 officers approached. Grace Okonkwo. Yes, sir. You're under arrest for theft and extortion. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Grace's eyes met Mrs. Folake's. The older woman looked devastated, helpless, but Grace felt strangely calm. She'd been preparing for this moment, planning for Kenneth's retaliation. As the officers led her toward their vehicle, Grace saw Kenneth watching from a second-floor window, a satisfied smile on his face. He thought he'd won by getting her arrested first, by controlling the narrative, by using his power to silence her. He was wrong. Grace had made a phone call before leaving her room that morning, to Kayamika at the legal aid office, explaining Judith's offer to hire private counsel. Kayamika had given her a name, Adiz Nwosu, one of Lagos's most formidable defense attorneys, someone who specialized in taking down powerful men who abused their positions. And Grace had already sent Adiz copies of all her recordings, all her evidence, with instructions to release everything to the media if Grace was arrested. Kenneth had just accelerated his own destruction. At the police station, Grace was processed and placed in a holding cell. 2 hours later, a commanding woman in an elegant navy suit appeared, speaking authoritatively to the desk sergeant. I'm Adiz Nwosu, attorney for Miss Okonkwo. I'm here to arrange bail and review the charges against my client. The sergeant looked uncomfortable. Ma, the charges are serious. Theft, extortion. Charges that I will prove are completely fabricated within the next 24 hours. Adiz's voice cut through the room like a blade. Now, I want to see my client. Immediately. When Adiz entered the holding cell, she looked at Grace with respect. "You're the girl who recorded everything?" "Yes, Ma. Smart. Very smart." Adiz sat beside her on the bench. "Here's what's going to happen. Kenneth Adeyemi thinks he's being clever by filing criminal charges against you first, trying to make you look like the aggressor. But he's made a critical mistake. He's put this case into the legal system, which means everything is now on the record, subject to discovery, open to public scrutiny." "What does that mean?" "It means when we defend you against these fabricated charges, we get to present evidence. All of your evidence. The recordings, the text messages, the testimony from other victims. And once it's part of the legal record, the media can report on it without fear of defamation lawsuits." Adiz smiled grimly. "Kenneth just gave us exactly what we needed, a public platform to expose him." Grace felt hope rising in her chest. "So what happens now?" Now we go to war." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. News of the case had spread through Lagos like wildfire. Wealthy hotel owner versus his housekeeper. Accusations flying both directions. Whispers of abuse, HIV, and revenge. Every major newspaper had covered the story, though most initial headlines favored Kenneth. Millionaire hotel owner victim of extortion by housekeeper. But that narrative was about to change. Grace sat beside Adiz at the defense table, wearing a simple but dignified dress that Judith had purchased for her. Across the aisle, Kenneth sat with his team of 3 expensive lawyers, looking thinner and sicker than ever, but projecting confidence. Judge Okafor, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, entered the courtroom. Everyone rose. "This is a bail hearing for Miss Grace Okonkwo, charged with theft and extortion," Judge Okafor announced. "I've reviewed the case files from both sides, and I must say, this is one of the most complex situations I've encountered. Counselors, present your arguments." Kenneth's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Chief Williams, stood first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of criminal behavior. Miss Okonkwo worked for my client for 4 months, during which time she systematically stole money and valuables from his office and residence. When confronted, she attempted to blackmail him by threatening to make false accusations of sexual impropriety unless he paid her significant sums of money. My client has evidence of missing funds, missing jewelry, and threatening text messages from the defendant. And what evidence do you have that Miss Okonkwo committed these thefts?" Judge Okafor asked. "She had access to all areas of the hotel, Your Honor. She was alone in my client's office and penthouse on multiple occasions. And we have witnesses who saw her behaving suspiciously." "Behaving suspiciously is not evidence of theft, Chief Williams. Do you have any physical evidence? Surveillance footage? Fingerprints on the stolen items?" Chief Williams hesitated. The surveillance system in Mr. Adeyemi's private areas was not functioning during the relevant period. "How convenient," Judge Okafor interrupted dryly. "Continue." "The threatening text messages, Your Honor, clearly show intent to extort. I'll review those messages. Miss Nwosu, your response." Adiz stood with commanding presence. "Your Honor, the charges against my client are entirely fabricated, a desperate attempt by Mr. Adeyemi to silence a victim of systematic sexual abuse, workplace harassment, and assault. Miss Okonkwo is not a thief or an extortionist. She is a survivor who documented her abuse in order to protect herself. Those are serious counter-accusations, Miss Nwosu. Do you have evidence?" "Extensive evidence, Your Honor. Audio recordings of Mr. Adeyemi explicitly threatening my client, admitting to prior abuse of other employees, and dismissing my client's warnings about her HIV-positive status. Text messages proving a pattern of coercion, and testimony from multiple witnesses, former employees who experienced identical abuse." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Okafor banged her gavel. "Order." Miss Nwosu approached the bench. "Chief Williams, you as well." Both attorneys approached with tablets containing evidence. Judge Okafor spent 20 minutes reviewing materials, her expression growing darker with each passing minute. Finally, she looked up. "I'm going to hear one of these recordings in open court. Miss Nwosu, Play the recording from April 18th. Adiz connected her tablet to the courtroom's audio system. Kenneth's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Your job is whatever I say it is. I own this hotel, Grace. I own everything in it, including you, that girl before you, the one who tried to report me. She's cleaning toilets at a bus station now. That's what happens to girls who cross me. The courtroom fell completely silent. Several reporters were typing frantically. Kenneth's face had gone pale. Your Honor, Chief Williams began, the authenticity of this recording can be verified by forensic audio analysts, which I will order. Judge Okafor cut him off. But Mr. Adeyemi's voice is quite distinctive. That certainly sounds like your client threatening an employee. She turned to the prosecution table. Mr. Adeyemi, stand up. Kenneth stood slowly, looking unsteady. Did you make those statements to Miss Okonkwo? Kenneth glanced at his lawyers. Your Honor, that is the context. Yes or no, Mr. Adeyemi? Did you make those statements? A long pause. Yes, but... And did Miss Okonkwo inform you of her HIV-positive status before you engaged in intimate relations with her? Kenneth's lawyers looked panicked. Your Honor, my client doesn't have to answer. He does if you want me to take his theft and extortion charges seriously. Did she inform you, Mr. Adeyemi? Kenneth looked trapped. If he said yes, he admitted knowing the risk and proceeding anyway. If he said no, Grace's recording would prove him a liar. She mentioned something, but I didn't believe. So she did inform you. Thank you for that clarification. Judge Okafor's expression was ice. Bail is granted for Miss Okonkwo. She will be released immediately on her own recognizance. Your Honor, Chief Williams protested. The theft charges will be investigated properly with actual evidence, not convenient accusations designed to silence an abuse victim. Furthermore, I am ordering the Lagos State Police to open a formal investigation into Mr. Adeyemi's conduct toward his employees, past and present. This court is adjourned. The gavel banged. The courtroom exploded with noise. Reporters rushed toward both legal teams. Photographers' cameras flashed constantly. Kenneth remained standing at his table, looking stunned. His carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time, broadcast across every news outlet in Lagos. Grace felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Adiz squeezed her shoulder. That's just round one. The real fight starts now. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters surrounded them. Adiz raised her hand for silence. My client, Miss Grace Okonkwo, is a victim of sexual abuse and workplace harassment by Kenneth Adeyemi. Over the coming weeks, we will present overwhelming evidence of his systematic predation of vulnerable young women. This case is not about theft or extortion. It's about power, privilege, and the courage it takes for victims to speak truth to authority. Thank you. As they pushed through the crowd toward a waiting car, Grace glimpsed Judith standing at the edge of the gathering, watching. Their eyes met briefly. Judith nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that the alliance was holding, the plan was working. That evening, every news channel in Lagos led with the story. Kenneth's business partners began distancing themselves. Investors questioned their commitments. Former employees started coming forward with their own stories. The empire Kenneth had built on exploitation and abuse was finally, irreversibly collapsing. And Grace, the poor housekeeper from Enugu whom he'd thought he could destroy with impunity, had lit the match that burned it all down. 3 months after the explosive bail hearing, Lagos was consumed by the trial of Kenneth Adeyemi. What had started as theft charges against Grace had transformed into a massive criminal case against Kenneth himself, with charges including sexual harassment, assault, coercion, workplace abuse, and violations of labor laws. The prosecution, now led by a special team from the Attorney General's office, had built an overwhelming case. Grace's recordings were authenticated by forensic experts. 5 former employees testified, each describing nearly identical patterns of abuse spanning over a decade. Mrs. Folake, finally freed from years of fearful silence, provided devastating testimony about Kenneth's systematic targeting of vulnerable young women. Kenneth's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. His lawyers tried every strategy, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, suggesting the women colluded for financial gain, painting Kenneth as the victim of a conspiracy. Nothing worked. The most damaging moment came when Amaka took the stand. She detailed her experience working at the hotel at 18, Kenneth's escalating harassment, her refusal, and the false theft charges that resulted in her arrest and 3 days in jail. He told me the same thing he told Grace. Amaka testified, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. He said I was nothing, that no one would believe me, that he owned everything including me. But he was wrong. We're not nothing. We're human beings who deserve dignity and justice. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Okafor allowed it to continue for several seconds before restoring order. Kenneth's health continued deteriorating throughout the trial. He'd finally begun HIV treatment, but years of damage couldn't be quickly reversed. He appeared in court in a wheelchair, looking decades older than his actual age. Some observers felt sympathy for his condition, but Grace felt none. She remembered her own diagnosis, the fear and shame she'd experienced, the responsible way she'd managed her health and tried to protect others. Kenneth had ignored every warning, dismissed her humanity, and now faced consequences he'd brought entirely upon himself. The trial's most surprising witness was Judith Adeyemi. She took the stand in the final week, testifying not about Kenneth's infidelity, which was now public knowledge, but about his character. "I've been married to Kenneth for 20 years, Judith said calmly. "I thought I knew him. I thought he was a good man who worked hard and contributed to society. I was wrong." She looked directly at her husband. "The man I married is a predator who used his wealth and power to abuse vulnerable women. He's a liar who put my health at risk through his reckless behavior. And he's a coward who tried to destroy his victims rather than face accountability for his actions." Kenneth wouldn't meet her eyes. After 6 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 5 hours. On the charge of sexual harassment and workplace abuse, how do you find the defendant? "Guilty, Your Honor." On the charge of assault and coercion? "Guilty, Your Honor." On the charge of abuse of power? "Guilty, Your Honor." Guilty on all counts. Judge Okafor scheduled sentencing for the following week. When that day arrived, the courtroom was once again packed. Kenneth appeared, barely able to sit upright, his lawyers supporting him on either side. Judge Okafor addressed the courtroom with stern authority. "Mr. Kenneth Adeyemi, you have been found guilty of numerous serious crimes against vulnerable women under your employ. The evidence presented at trial revealed a pattern of systematic abuse spanning over a decade, affecting at least 7 known victims and likely many more who remained silent." She paused, letting the words sink in. "You were given wealth, success, and influence. Rather than using these gifts responsibly, you weaponized them against people who depended on you for their livelihoods. You showed no remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing, and even attempted to further victimize your accusers through false criminal charges." Kenneth's head hung low. "This court sentences you to 25 years in prison for sexual harassment, assault, coercion, and abuse of power. You will serve a minimum of 15 years before being eligible for parole. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution to each identified victim in the amount of 5 million naira, plus all legal fees incurred in their defense." The gavel banged with finality. Kenneth's lawyers immediately filed appeals, but legal experts agreed the conviction was solid. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict just. Outside the courthouse, Grace faced reporters for the final time. Adiz stood beside her, along with Amaka, Mrs. Folake, and 3 other survivors who'd found courage to come forward. "Miss Okonkwo, how do you feel about the verdict?" a reporter called out. Grace took a deep breath before speaking. "I don't feel victorious. I feel relieved. Relieved that he can't hurt anyone else. Relieved that the truth came out. Relieved that justice, though slow, eventually arrived." What message do you have for other survivors of workplace abuse? "I want them to know that silence protects abusers, not victims. Speaking up is terrifying, I know, because I lived it. But your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter." Grace's voice grew stronger. "Find allies. Document everything. And don't let anyone convince you that power makes someone untouchable. It doesn't. The truth is more powerful than money, more powerful than influence, more powerful than fear. What's next for you? Grace smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in months. I'm going home to Enugu. I'm going to hug my mother and my cousins. And then I'm going to start studying. Mrs. Judith Adeyemi has offered to sponsor my university education. I want to study law so I can help other women like me find justice. The reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras flashed, but Grace barely noticed. She was already thinking about the future, a future she'd fought so hard to claim. Judith approached as the press conference ended. The two women embraced, an unlikely alliance forged in pain but strengthened by shared purpose. "Thank you," Grace whispered. "For everything." "Thank you for your courage," Judith replied. "You saved more lives than you know." As Grace walked away from the courthouse that day, she passed a newsstand displaying the evening papers. The headlines had finally changed. Justice for the voiceless. Hotel magnate convicted in landmark abuse case. Housekeeper's bravery brings down predatory businessman. Kenneth Adeyemi sentenced to 25 years. A victory for workplace safety. Grace bought a copy to send her mother. Proof that speaking truth to power, though dangerous and painful, could ultimately triumph. 6 months later, Grace enrolled at the University of Lagos School of Law. She studied diligently, remembering every lesson learned during her ordeal. She joined advocacy groups for survivors of sexual violence and workplace abuse. She volunteered at the same legal aid office where Kayamika had first helped her. And every semester, she received a scholarship check from the Judith Adeyemi Foundation for survivors of workplace abuse, a foundation Judith had created using the assets she'd claimed in her divorce from Kenneth. Grace's story became a landmark case studied in Nigerian law schools. It prompted new legislation strengthening protections for domestic workers and service industry employees. Hotels across Lagos implemented stricter oversight policies and anonymous reporting systems. Kenneth Adeyemi served his sentence in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. His hotels were sold to pay restitution to his victims. His name, once synonymous with success and philanthropy, became a cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of unchecked power. And Grace Okonkwo, the poor housekeeper from Enugu who dared to document her abuse and fight back, became a symbol of hope for countless silent sufferers across Nigeria and beyond. Her journey from victim to victor proved a simple but profound truth. Justice delayed is not always justice denied. Sometimes it's justice carefully prepared, methodically built, and ultimately unstoppable. The end. Thank you for watching the complete story of Grace Okonkwo. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about justice and courage, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories. Comment below and let us know. What was your favorite moment from this story? What lesson will you take away? Where are you watching from? We have viewers from over 100 countries. Share this story with someone who needs to hear a message of hope and empowerment. Together, we can amplify voices that deserve to be heard. Don't forget to check out our other powerful stories in the playlist and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next upload. Remember, your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, stay strong and keep fighting for justice. Folded hands, raised fist, asterisk, asterisk.